All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly wide ranging and honestly kind of dizzying conversation. Recently, Glenn Beck and Donald Trump sat down for an interview that covered just an enormous amount of ground. We're talking everything from country music icons to covert CIA operations, sweeping domestic deregulation, and absolute hardball international trade. Our goal today is to pull out the most significant claims and policy stances from that source material and just lay them all out clearly for you. To make sense of it all, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover 1. A tribute to Dolly Parton. 2. Global flashpoints in Russia and Iran. 3. Domestic policy and affordability. 4. The meat processing cartel. And finally, 5. Taking on Canadian trade. Let's get right into it. Section 1. A tribute to Dolly Parton. An unprecedented honors for an entertainer. So the interview actually kicked off with a pretty unexpected cultural moment before diving into any of the heavy political maneuvering. Glenn Beck pointed out Trump's unprecedented move to lower the flags to half-staff for an entertainer. Trump's explanation? Well, he said simply, she was unique. He even compared it to losing a member of the family. What's interesting here is that when Beck guessed maybe half her fans would oppose her politics, Trump pushed right back on that. He estimated it was way lower, closer to 20%, basically saying that above all else, she was universally loved. But as these interviews go, they didn't linger on cultural nostalgia for long. Beck made a massive pivot, straight from mourning an icon to high-stakes international rumors, specifically bringing up some swirling speculation about the CIA. Which brings us to Section 2, Global Flashpoints in Russia and Iran. We're talking diplomacy, conflict, and blockades. Now, let's break down some of the wild internet rumors versus what Trump actually stated as his intelligence. There was speculation that CIA Director John Ratcliffe was over in Russia testing NATO. Trump flat out denied that. He stated Ratcliffe was there strictly to end the war in Ukraine, claiming both sides actually want it over. Then over to Iran. He debunked the rumor that the Ayatollah was dead, noting he was just severely wounded instead. And he really hammered home the claim that ending the Obama-era nuclear deal was the one crucial move that kept Iran from getting nuclear weapons. Trump also drew a really firm line between his foreign policy claims and domestic realities. He asserted that if he had stayed in office, the Ukraine war literally never would have started. And he tied that directly to a staggering number, 25 million. That's how many people he claims have crossed the U.S. border, alleging that this group includes criminals, drug dealers, and murderers. So in Trump's narrative, the failure to stop the war in Europe and the failure to secure the border, they're symptoms of the exact same administrative incompetence. Circling back to Iran, Trump projected a lot of confidence here, outlining some massive structural weaknesses within the regime. Beyond the Ayatollah's injuries, Trump claimed the whole country is crippled by 300% inflation, rendering their money practically useless. He also asserted their military forces are effectively depleted and literally going unpaid. Plus, he highlighted a highly successful U.S. naval blockade that's actively taking out hostile boats and opening the strait for global oil transit. He really framed the whole situation as a massive, imminent victory over the regime. So after painting this picture of an America dominating on the world stage against weakened adversaries, the focus shifted inward. Let's see how all this feeds into the domestic debate. Moving on to Section 3, Domestic Policy and Affordability, focusing on Sharia law and the economy. Beck framed this part of the chat around what he called enemies inside our own gates. He pointed to a perceived alliance between Marxist groups and Islam, straight up asking if Trump would push to prohibit Sharia law in America. Trump was completely on board, agreeing wholeheartedly. He claimed that pockets of Sharia law are actually already popping up in the U.S. He pointed to London and Paris as cautionary tales of this second way of life, insisting that America absolutely has to maintain one unified system. Naturally, that domestic conversation bled right into the economy. Beck asked how Republicans should address younger voters who feel like there's this massive affordability crisis. Well, Trump responded with a fierce defense of his own record. He argued that he actually inherited the worst inflation in history when he took office, pointing out that basic goods were 5 times higher than they'd been just years prior. And this is fascinating. He claimed that the word affordability is actually a political buzzword recently cooked up by Democrats just to mask their own incompetence in running the country. Okay, so here's where things took a real turn. The crucial point is how this huge macroeconomic discussion suddenly zoomed way in on a very specific microeconomic issue: cattle ranchers. That takes us to Section 4, the meat processing cartel, monopolies, and federal regulations. Seemingly out of nowhere, Beck brought up a really passionate grievance, speaking from his own personal experience. He described the agriculture industry as being totally controlled by a meat processing cartel. He asserted that just 4 massive processing plants hold a total market monopoly. And get this, he claims 2 of them are actually foreign-owned. Beck accused them of collusion, saying they create this impossible bottleneck for independent American farmers who are just trying to process their own beef.
And the culprit for this bottleneck, according to Beck? The federal government. He passionately pleaded with Trump, literally saying, "The regulations are killing us, let your people go." He pointed straight at intense inspections enforced by the USDA and the FDA. What was really interesting was watching Trump process this idea in real time. He seemed to have a genuine light bulb moment. He asked Beck directly if less regulation would allow ranchers to do a good job processing the beef themselves. When Beck said yes, Trump declared it a very good idea to strip back those regulations to break the back of this processing monopoly.
Now, for the final segment, the interview took one last, pretty surprising geographical leap. It shifted north to air some deeply held trade grievances against one of America's closest allies. Section 5. Taking on Canadian trade, specifically tariffs and deficits. Trump did not hold back on America's northern neighbor. Now, just to be clear, he made a point to say he loves Canadians, but he zeroed his sights strictly on the Canadian Trade Administration. To back up his aggressive stance, he cited a pretty incredible figure: 400%. He claimed Canada slaps an unbelievable 400% tariff on American milk. He pointed to this as prime evidence of decades of unfair trade practices that have been hurting American farmers. And he didn't stop at agriculture. He broadened it out to the whole economy. Trump claimed that the United States loses at least $60 billion a year dealing with Canada. $60 billion! He argued that Canadian trade policies have historically taken advantage of the U.S., not just in agriculture, but the auto industry too, basically saying they've been treating the U.S. as if it were just another Canadian province to be exploited. He wrapped up this segment by confidently stating his willingness to play absolute hardball. He declared, "It's time to teach Canada you can't do this anymore." He really framed Canada's trade policies not as the actions of a partner, but almost like hostile economic maneuvers. He insisted that the U.S. doesn't actually need Canadian goods. He said that, sure, it might be a little inconvenient, but America can absolutely get by without them in order to force a much better deal. And that brings us to the end of our breakdown. From Dolly Parton to the USDA, and from Iranian naval blockades to Canadian milk tariffs, this interview was an absolute whirlwind of sweeping policy proposals. So we'll leave you with this final thought. If these overarching strategies, we're talking aggressive protectionism and massive domestic deregulation, if those are actually applied on the world stage, how will it actually reshape the costs of your daily life? Thanks for joining me to unpack this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.